Good evening and welcome to the sixth presentation of Avalanche Canada's 2021-22 webinar series. My name is Brent Strand. I'm your producer for the evening. We got Nancy Geismar in the back. She's moderating the Q&A box and putting links in the chat. We're so stoked to have you folks joining us for tonight's webinar. Avalanche Canada's mission is to help educate backcountry users such as yourself to go out there, play safe in the mountains this winter, because we all want you to know more, go farther, and come home. First off, we'd like to acknowledge that our session is being hosted in the territory of four nations, the Sinnix, the Secwepemc, the Ktunaxa, the Silks, and as a national organization, we also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations whose lands we live and recreate on. First off, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And with that being said, I'll go back to where those slides are. We have a whole bunch of government partners that help us at Avalanche Canada. We're a nonprofit organization. We have program partners that help us with our essential programs going on, as well as premier partners, our supporting sponsors. And then we have a whole bunch of contributors that help us make things happen around here. You know, we also want to thank for tonight's webinar is hosted primarily by Mountain Equipment Company, as well as some support from Forecast Ski Magazine. You know, Avalanche Canada is a nonprofit organization. We thank you for joining us tonight. If you guys want to donate any amount of money for programs such as this, we always love supporting programs by donating, and you can do that as well. So there'll be a link in the chat box to make that happen. Nancy's going to populate that in there for you. A couple little Zoom attendee notes. You guys all came on. You're muted to start things off. Your webcams don't work. With that being said, if you want to ask a question, bottom of your screen, there's a little raise hand feature. That's a verbal question, which is great. You have that verbal interaction with the presenters. Feel free to do that. But if you're a little shy, you can type in that Q&A box at the bottom and get those questions into us. There will be a time during the end of the presentations today for the Q&A. So keep those questions in your pocket, and then we'll address those at the end of the session tonight. There's also a chat box that Nancy's going to populate important web links and resources that may be mentioned in tonight's presentation. So tonight's presentation, Ready to Rescue. Everyone who heads in the backcountry, we hope you're doing that regular trailhead transceiver check, and hopefully that's the only time you're going to get your transceiver out in the day. However, accidents happen. And even if they don't happen to you or your group, you might be assisting in another group's rescue you might come upon. Do you know what to do? Do you know how to organize a rescue? Have you practiced with your gear? Have you practiced with your crew? Like, do the rest of the people you go out there with, do they have a clue on what's going on? You know, do those companions, they have capability to rescue you? Tonight's presentation is going to highlight the essentials of what you need to know and especially practice these skills. They got to be muscle memory out there. Our presenters this evening, Chris Rubens and Drew Nyland. Chris is a pro rider, and he's also an Avalanche ambassador for Avalanche Canada. Drew Nyland is an Avalanche Canada field technician in the Yukon, and both of them are going to bring a wealth of information and knowledge today. We're going to be sharing some life-saving tips with you tonight, so I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to pass it along to Chris and Drew now, so I hope you enjoy this evening's presentation.
Awesome. So I think I'm Drew. I'm going to jump in first here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Chris afterwards. Can I get a thumbs up, Chris, if you can hear me? Sweet. Yeah, cool. Rocking. So what I thought made some sense here was, thanks for the intro, Brent. I'm going to share my screen. Boop, boop, boop. This should be everything here. And I'll just start like this. Okay.
Good, Drew.
So this is, as Brent said, the sixth session in the webinar series this year. I'm super excited to be back. I'm especially honored to be here with Chris. And I just want to say thanks again to Mountain Equipment Co-op and Forecast Ski Magazine for making this all a reality. I think it's such valuable information. And then to have some firsthand experience and a chance to get some dialogue going about a couple of the finer points of rescue is going to be awesome. And hopefully everyone here today thinks the same. So if I go there, we're going to jump right into it. So the rescue we're talking about is companion rescue. And there's kind of a bunch of parts of companion rescue, but we often get kind of tunnel vision on this subject, on this part. We get in there and we practice companion rescue, and companion rescue that we practice is often with a beacon. It starts right here often. Looking at our beacon, we have a signal, we're moving towards something. So if you've ever taken an AST1 course or a companion skills rescue course, you've done this. And there's probably a whole part that you talk about, but this is where you start. The next pit you do is probably looks a lot like this. You probe, you shovel, it's really tactile. You touch and feel, and that interactivity is part of why it can become muscle memory. My coworker and friend James tells me all the time that this is the part you can be so good at. You can practice this all the time, and you can get really, really dialed in these systems. We at Avalanche Canada really kind of hammer home this like get the gear part of companion rescue. These are kind of the fundamentals. It's a transceiver or a beacon, probe, and shovel. And those are the tools of the trade, and that's what we use to execute a companion rescue. If you've done one of these courses before, or even if you've seen them online, you might have seen one of these too. This is a companion rescue card. And it's a list view. As you can see, it's got 11 points, and each point has multiple subpoints. And you could carry this in your backpack or in your coat if you wanted. And if stuff started getting really dynamic and really challenging, you could pull this out and it would lay out a path for you to walk. It would be 1 to 11, how to execute a companion rescue. And that's really awesome. And something I wanted to highlight just looking at these cards was that the companion rescue we often practice is, number 6 to number 10, maybe. So it's like a third of what an entire companion rescue is. There's all this other stuff that goes on. And I think I'm super happy to, if there are questions at any point, to answer questions about the nuts and bolts of companion rescue. But I think just because of the video we're going to get to see, and because we have Chris here, we're really going to dive into this part of companion rescue, the first half. The part that you may have practiced by saying, is the scene safe? Or who's the leader? And these are all things that are important. They're really important to say, I think, especially when you're playing like make believe out there and you're standing in maybe a parking lot and you're trying to imagine what this rescue is going to be like. And that's how you're working through it. And so those things are really important to think about. But how do they actually, what is the scene safe actually mean? Right? So there's this whole part of companion rescue that, in my opinion, gets forgotten lots. And I think is a great opportunity to like really dive into all this stuff. So the whole reason I figure I'm here is to kind of try to tease out some of these like finer points. And I thought I would try to capture them here. And then hopefully at the end, after Chris gets a chance to talk and we see his video, we'll double back on some of these points. But I wanted to start with scene safety. Scene safety is the scene safe? It can mean so much. It's everything from, is there a chance for another avalanche to come down? Is the area I'm going into safe for me to be because maybe it's full of rocks now that all the snow is gone? Are the people on the scene glued to their beacon and they can't look up, so there's a chance they might hit each other or hit something? There's so many components to scene safety, and it's assess safety is written on the card and we talk about it lots, but there's so many parts to it. So I hope we can extrapolate on a lot of that as the webinar goes on. This is one of my favorites, the mental map. So we talk about it lots in the industry, and I know in other industries too they talk about it. I know aviation is really big into mental maps, and I think it's something we can all take a piece out of. It's something we can learn. So a mental map in this context is really like a bird's eye view of what's going on. And it can include like things that are literally happening around you. So like, oh, where the other rescuers maybe are, or where your switchbacks might have been, or where the edge of the debris is compared to you. That's all your mental map. But other things that could be in your mental map that you definitely want to be thinking about out there in this like really likely stressful and dynamic situation are like other resources, where they might be in relation to you, and how long it might take for help to arrive if you do need more than just yourself. This is one that we could talk about a lot. Communication in a professional context, like in Chris's case, they probably use radios every time they go out ski touring, and I don't think that's the norm recreating. It's not my norm recreating. I don't carry a radio for fun. Usually, I do at work. I think in the sledding world, that's really quite common, and I think it's really awesome. But communication means a lot more than just our person to person communication. It's how do we call for help from afar? It's also our communication between people, how concise we are when we're giving information. Where are you going to ski? How are you going to ski it? And then did that person understand what I thought they understood? So there's so many facets around communication, and we could talk about a lot of different ones, and we're going to get to see a lot of really awesome examples in Chris's video, but just some things to be thinking about as we watch all this to come back to some conversation points at the end. And then visual clues. So this is like your heads up skiing or your heads up riding or snowmobiling. There's going to be a lot of information in the companion rescue world coming in all the time. And you need to be assessing that as you move through your scenario, and you're going to get visual clues. And I think often when people practice, we get there may be like a pole sticking out of the snow, and it's like maybe we should check the pole, and that's a really great visual clue. And there are a lot of them, and they're not often as simple as a pole or a hand reaching out. Sometimes they can be where the debris ended up, or how the avalanche moved through terrain, or what's the shape of the terrain, or what are some likely burial spots like near trees or in creeks or these kinds of things. And these are all going to be incoming information. It all helps populate your mental map. And the mental map, just to go back to that for 1 second, the mental map is something that at the beginning you have no information likely. You might have in your mind, you may have like a triangle with an avalanche through it. That's the mountain with the avalanche. You might not know that much more. But as you bring in information through all the visual clues throughout the scenario, you can populate that map, and all of a sudden it can become really vivid. And you could, the way I think about it is you can spend time kind of coloring in the areas that you've searched or that are no longer in need of your focus, and you can move forward from there. So that's like a really, really brief kind of just starter of the stuff that I would love to talk about throughout this with all of you and with Chris. And I just wanted to kind of front load all that. So to break down like the best practices of all this, I thought instead of you hearing my voice for the whole 10 minutes I'm allotted, I would try to just give a run through of what an awesome product called Avi Savvy looks like. It's Avalanche Canada's online avalanche tutorial. And it's really great in a number of ways. So it can work as some pre-reading or some front loading of information before an AST1 or an AST2 or a companion rescue skills course. And you can kind of get that reading in beforehand. So when you hear it in a course, you've heard it now twice. But it can also be a great resource for people that have training already. People that have taken an AST1 or 2, and they're really looking to recalibrate. And you can be recalibrating all the time. If it's been a while, it's a great resource to kind of hear it all again in a new way and in a bunch of different ways. So I thought I would just jump out of my PowerPoint here. So this is maybe the trickiest part of my whole day. And I would bring you to this. So if you type in Avi Savvy, Avi with one V, Savvy with two Vs, your .avalanche.ca, you're going to come to this page here. And it's quite simple. It's got 8 chapters, and hopefully most of the things that you're interested about for recreational travel and avalanche terrain is in one of these chapters, and hopefully it's organized in such a way, which it kind of is, where you can find what you're looking for pretty quick. So ours is really easy. We scroll down here, we jump onto companion rescue. And just as like a quick overview of what you're seeing here, chapter 7, companion rescue. It's a lot of the same information, but offered up in different ways. So on the left, it's written out. At the bottom, it's like some interactivity. If you hover over these logos, you get more information about what's going on. And then there are these videos. They're put together by Backcountry Learning, and they're awesome. They're a minute long, and I thought instead of hearing my voice, we'd just hear this real quick.
When an avalanche involvement happens in the backcountry, time is everything. Research shows that if someone is recovered within the first 10 minutes, their chances of survival are relatively high. But after that initial 10 minutes, survival rates drop dramatically. We're going to go over the most efficient and effective ways to conduct a search of a buried person. Before you start your search, there are a few key things that you can do to save time in the long run. The first is to choose a leader. An organised approach with someone in charge will be the most effective. The role of the leader might vary. They might take an active part in the search, or, if it's a large group, it might be best for them to concentrate on the big picture and act more as a coordinator than an active searcher. The next thing to do is to assess the safety of the scene. Is it actually safe to start a search from where you are, or will it lead to further involvement? Are there still areas above the scene that might avalanche? Would it be best to send in fewer searchers to minimize your exposure? Should you post a lookout who can warn you from further danger while you search? The other thing to do is to take a head count. How many people are missing? Did you see them in the avalanche? If so, where was the last place you saw them? You should mark this last seen point in order to narrow down the search area. If you didn't see them in the avalanche, did someone else, and can they tell you?
So easy as that. So we jump back in here. We go to signal search, which is kind of the next big piece of what happens in Chris's video. And it's another minute. It breaks it down. There's some hover icons. And for what it's worth, I think we just listen to this video too, just before we see Chris and his, just so we all see the kind of Avalanche Canada best practice on this stuff.
Now that you're ready to start your search, it's time to turn all your transceivers to search. It's really important to do a physical check of everyone in your group to make sure that no one is still on send. Otherwise your search will be confused and slowed down. How big is the search area? Think about the last seen point. Are there any clues on the surface of the snow? Can you see anything belonging to the missing person in the debris? If so, that would be a great place to send someone to search. If your transceiver doesn't pick up a signal right away, move as quickly as you can down the debris in a zigzag pattern until you find a signal. To maximize efficiency and ensure you cover the whole search area, leave 20 meters from the edge of the debris and 40 meters between your switchbacks. If you're in a group, rescuers should space themselves out over the search area and move down the debris in a systematic way. And those rescuers should be spaced out no more than 40 meters apart.
So there you have it. That's kind of the quick and easy breakdown of that. It's a resource you can go back and watch again. And I think without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Chris, and then I'll come back on for some conversation at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Drew. That was sweet. It's yeah, it's kind of funny watching those videos and like there's like it feels so much like there's so much information and so much to think about, and then just like thinking about like all the things that like went so quickly through my head in that incident, the incident that I'm going to show you. But quickly, Brent, can we run a quick poll on like kind of what the level of Avalanche users I think we have out there?
Yeah.
Just kind of
Sure.
while I talk about the lead into this video here.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about what kind of training everybody has out there.
Perfect. Yeah, just to get an idea of like kind of where everyone's at. It's like interesting to hear that. But yeah, like while you guys are answering that, I'll kind of go through a little bit of background of the video that we're about to show. It's just over 6 minutes, and it does a really good job of explaining itself for sure. But there we go. Okay, so we got over 50% of people have AST1s. That's awesome. And yeah, a lot of AST2. So yeah, quite experienced. What about people that have been involved in an avalanche or involved in a rescue? Would be a good one to know too. It's funny. I'm in up at Revelstoke right now, and we're up at the Sutton, and I'm with the whole like Solomon teams here. We get together every year, and we're doing our safety training, and that was kind of like the overwhelming thing that we had was how thankful that we had done all this training, because there'd been a couple incidents last year. So 20% of people have been involved in an avalanche. That's actually quite high. I'm a bit surprised at that, but hopefully it went well for everyone. This incident, so I've been skiing in the backcountry for about 20 years now, and this is the very first time for me that I've actually pulled my beacon out and started searching for somebody. I'm very thankful for that because it was quite terrifying, but I'm also thankful for the amount of training I had because it felt quite smooth overall. But yeah, I think that is like a really important part of this is like like at the start I wasn't spending a ton of time out there, but now almost 100% of my days are in the backcountry, and this is like not something I'm really trying to avoid for sure. But yeah, so kind of the background of this story is it was Forecast Magazine. They organize this kind of web series that's sponsored by Toyota, and we tried to do it in the Rockies, didn't work out, with all the COVID stuff going on, and we ended up doing it in Revelstoke, and we got myself, and then Noah Morrison was the other pro skier, and he's from Vernon. And so kind of the premise of the video series that we were doing was for me to show Noah my backyard, and then I would go to Vernon and he'd show me his backyard. And he's like comes from a very freestyle background, grew up in the park, went to all sorts of competitions, crazy, does a lot of whirly things that I don't even know the name of. Incredibly nice guy, super fun to ski with. But this was right at the start of January last year. I'd obviously spent my entire winter in Revelstoke, had been following along with the snowpack very closely, and was overall feeling quite good about things, as far as like my confidence in what was going on in the snowpack and whatnot. And I think we'd skied on the hill maybe 2 or 3 days, and this was our day that it popped blue, and I kind of had the whole plan for the day in the back of my head. And what you'll see for those that are familiar with the area, so it's at the resort, and then you head out the south boundary, you walk along, and you kind of walk along that first ridge, and you drop down, and then kind of the first bowl you're at We call that Montana Bowl. And that's where we did our first warm-up run. It's pretty inconsequential, well, not inconsequential terrain, but it's like a nice piece that you can like work your way up into. And you don't see that in the video. Both Noah and I skied a really fun line down there, and we watched people skiing all sorts of stuff while we're there, and we're like, whoa, like things are feeling pretty good. And then we walked up onto Kokanee Bowl and kind of got set for the next part of our day, got the filmers set. And yeah, I think I'll get the video playing here. And yeah, we'll kind of watch the video, and then yeah, Drew and I are gonna like kind of talk about a few points after the fact, but if you guys have any questions, comments, anything, we're here to answer them. But without any more, we'll watch the video.
See like the biggest nose, and there's two little dimples in the snow above it?
Yeah.
So the one to the looker's right, the dimple to the right, to the longest nose,
Yeah.
that's the best nose to come off of.
Okay.
Pretty lucky to get this good of conditions right
Yeah,
now.
this is unreal. Like
Yeah.
down there, like those mountain ranges and stuff, it's insane.
Oh, there you go, sender.
Oh yeah.
Whoa. Well, that was a good slope test. Yeah, buddy, you got it. You're gonna have fun. Yeah, just let me know when you're ready. I'll count you in. All right, 5 seconds for Noah. 3, 2, 1, dropping. Yeah, buddy. We had a bluebird day in Revelstoke. Started working into the terrain, and everything was feeling really good. There was a ton of people out there. There was a lot of people skiing some pretty bold lines, and not a lot going on. And yeah, and to be honest, I was just feeling quite confident in the whole snowpack in general.
Oh, tomahawk, avalanche, 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 avalanche.
Oh, damn, I see him.
No, he was under there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I just hear this wall of like, and I just get hit, and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, please just be the slough from my line. And it wasn't. It was definitely more. I just remember being under with snow getting shoved down my throat. I was like, okay, I need to swim, or I need to just try and stay up. Swimming, I didn't know where I was. I was just stay above, stay above. I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, but that was the first time that I actually felt like I could really die.
And so I immediately got on the radio to the film crew and was like, eyes on, eyes on. And I mean, the next, we know now because it was only 90 seconds, but it was like so many different thoughts going through your head, but kind of just going through exactly what we practiced so much, but not really even thinking about it. It was just like automatic. I was like, didn't even really realize I'd pulled the radio out, said that, eyes on, eyes on. And then the next thing was like, how do I get down this slope? Because there was a ton of hang fire, and we were in kind of a technical area. And luckily I knew the zone really well and was able to go out left. Came around, stopped on a wind lip, and that's when I pulled out my beacon. Still couldn't see him. Saw a couple things in the snow, but switched my beacon to search and started my initial kind of grid search down the avalanche path. Two or three switchback turns in. I was moving pretty fast. I was looking at my beacon, like waiting for that signal, and then looked up and I saw something move and just immediately beelined it to him. You all right? Hey guys, he's okay. He's got an airway. We're okay. I'm gonna dig him out. Let's just have nobody ski above us.
That was a fucking scary thing.
Oh my god. You're all right, buddy. You're all right.
I started feeling myself coming to a stop, and I was like, okay, I like really hope I'm not deep under. Couldn't really see. I was able to move my head, and my arm was kind of here. I was able to go like this, kind of move snow across my face and push my head out just so I could see the sky. And I saw the sky, and I was like, I could have cried. I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna die.
The thing that I think that worked really well in our favor, and I've heard Jeremy Jones talk about this, of like how he picks lines, is he really tended to not pick lines that had exposure or they all had clean runouts. And it was a super clean runout. So there was no trees to get swiped into. There was no cliffs he was going over. There was no rocks to go into, because that's when an avalanche like that turns really serious. It was a big avalanche, but it wasn't a huge avalanche. But if it pushes you into something, that can be enough to really injure you or kill you. So having that nice smooth run out really worked in our favor.
You just never expect it to really happen. It's real out there, and it can happen at any point. So being prepared and having the right people with you is key for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so many different thoughts every time I watch that.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting watching the Avi Savvy stuff beforehand, and like it, like even to me, it just, like I said this before, it seems like so much information, and from all that training that I've done over the years, it's like those decisions are getting made so quickly, and you really like all the online tools and stuff are really good for everybody, but nothing beats practice, that's for sure, because your emotions are high, and like I really, in a lot of ways, like we were just talking about this downstairs, but you're kind of in this flow state, and you're not really like, you're almost not thinking, you're just like reacting because you have that training, and that's like kind of going on in the background.
Yeah, totally. After it happened, did you have like moments that, like before you had watched it again, where they're like, do you remember when you started like thinking about how it was going?
Yeah, I just remember, I mean, right off the start, it's like I started moving really quickly, because it's like I lost sight of him really quickly.
Yeah.
If I had been able to see him for longer, I would have obviously stayed there for a bit longer. But I knew, because I had like good familiarity with that area, I knew exactly where I was going to go down, and you can kind of see me when I'm going down. I'm like looking back a lot. I'm looking this way, like, because I'm like scared I'm gonna like trigger something myself. I was fairly confident that route that I chose down, that if I did have a slide there, that it would go to the left of where he ended up, and I had some high points that I could get onto. But yeah, I was moving quickly, but I would say I was moving quite cautiously.
There was a piece there beforehand where I was bringing up scene safety, and it's apparent, I think, watching the video, there's like 3 or 4 points where you're like double checking your safety process. It's like, as you left the ridge, you entered the slope, there's an awesome like full GoPro shoulder check. That's awesome. And then like pull up on the high spot, like reassess, beacon. And then my favorite scene safety moment you have is when you do get to him, which I can only imagine your heart was beating out of your chest, is that you're like, wait a minute, everyone else, just please don't ski down here.
Yeah, yeah, and like I don't even remember. It's funny, like when I watched that too, it's like I was like stoked that I got that out, but I was like, I barely, like, I knew he was breathing obviously, but I didn't really know that he was okay. I just like knew that he was on the surface, and it was like, okay, like we're this far, and like, yeah, there was, I mean, it is an interesting point. Mike Douglas was actually one of the filmers there, and that's what he was saying, is there's a bunch of people on the ridge, and his like initial thought was like, holy cow, like why aren't these people helping? And then he realized that would probably be the worst thing that they could do, because like sending an avalanche down on top of us would have been totally devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just thought I would define that. I saw it pop up in the chat and it struck me as maybe the only piece of jargon in there. But hang fire, for everyone, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's like the remaining snow that would have been part of the same slab kind of that's still hung up above you, right?
Yeah, totally. And in this case, it's like, it's almost like not like your classic hang fire. There's just like a lot of snow that hadn't slid anywhere, and there was obviously all of a sudden an instability that happened. So it was like everything was like kind of scary there, I felt. But yeah, and then like I think like the big take home from me, like big picture, is like, and you talked about this at the start, is like like when you are practicing, you're standing at the top, and there's like a guy that's set up your scenario, and you're like, is the scene safe? Can I go? Is there hang fire? And then like depending on like who you're training with, you'll like appoint a leader, and they'll be like, hey, you guys go and search with your beacons, and like, why don't you two pull out your probe and shovel? And like that might happen in like a scenario, but like reality is like you're probably gonna move down slope before you like really start getting into that kind of sort of thing. Yeah, it's like really kind of having that big mental map, and you can't see it so well in the GoPro, but as I was like on the slope, there was a bunch of things sticking out.
Okay.
Like I could see a couple things, but what I think I did quite well is like I made sure to like cover all the slope instead of going directly to those things. And it turned out that they were like parts of his backpack blew apart, so there's like a bunch of shrapnel around. And it really wasn't until I saw movement down at the bottom, like I saw something actually move, and I was like, oh, that's a person for sure. And then I beelined it. It's like really making sure, because if you have to go back up the slope, it's like it's real challenging.
Yeah, huge takeaway for me watching that video in your mental map is how you've got your plan, which is to do a signal search, right? This classic like zigzag maneuver. And even with the incoming information of like clues and stuff, as the single searcher out there, you still have to cover all your bait. That pole might not be attached to him, right? And you do that awesome. And then to see the mental switch of like, oh, that's a person, like beacon away. I'm going right. Like that's really cool to see, because maybe I've never practiced that ever in a rescue scenario where it's like, oh, all of a sudden you see them. What do you do? But obviously it flipped and you were like, they're right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, and super lucky with all that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I guess that's like a good thing to note of like where I took the beacon. Like I guess that's where I was trying to go before, is like where I took my beacon out. That was like the first place that I felt safe.
Right.
Like as I was going down that slope, I still wanted my beacon on, because I was in like very much avalanche terrain, and where I took it out was like the first, like I was like, oh, I just need to like slide onto the slope, and I'm like, then I'm on the debris, and it's like totally good for sure.
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. Finding those, like, I mean, as yeah, I think if you work in a professional context and even as like an avid recreator, your probably mind is predisposed to those like high points of land or islands of safety that you're kind of hopping between. But it's definitely demonstrated in the video there. That's really great.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, there's a few questions that have come in. I just thought this would be a good time to bring them in. From Dasha, he's asking, Chris, how has this incident changed how you equip yourself? Like, do you wear an avalanche bag or do anything differently?
It hasn't really changed how, I mean, I so I mean so this is like an interesting scenario because we got like the rescue went totally good, like everything was good, and we got him out, and I had like up there on the slope, I had my toboggan if I needed to get him out, I had a first aid kit, I had like all the things. So it's like having that plan if things go wrong. So for me, like I have all that safety gear. And from me personally, like as on a personal level, adding the airbag or something like that is like too much weight for me. Then I start taking other parts of the safety equation out of it. So yeah. When we got him out, he had lost all his skis. Luckily, he's a pretty young guy and he's like quite fit. And we were able to, within the group, get him out. You had to ski tour a little bit more out of there. So we ran a pair of skis down. And then me and another guy, I gave him my skis, and then me and another guy one skied out of there. But it's a really interesting part of that is that if he had been like even a little bit more hurt or not a super strong skier or whatever, then it's like an immediate rescue, like helicopter rescue call going on. And so the important thing is to have the means for that.
Yeah. Thanks. Lots of questions coming in. A couple that are related to looking back in hindsight, if there were red flags about the slope stability or anything missed looking back on it.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. Of course, in hindsight, there is a slope instability for sure. I think it's really important in these scenarios is to like go back to how you were thinking that day before the hindsight happens, because it's easy to judge yourself in hindsight. I was feeling really good. I had been in the area. I knew what was going on at the snowpack. My mindset for the day was like not for sure that we're going to go and ski these lines. I knew I wanted to go ski these lines, but we had a couple warm-up lines beforehand. And then we saw a bunch of people ski some like pretty wild stuff, like really good slope tests before then. So it was like a pretty good indicator for that whole side of things. But if you talk about hindsight, so that slope happened, it was about 2:00 in the afternoon. We didn't know this at the time, but a previous slope or another slope in the area avalanched at the same, like right around the same time. And then shortly after that, another one. And then the whole morning there was nothing. So the theory kind of goes is that there is it was a cold January day and there just must have been a tiny bit of daytime warming. And so like the snow was not moist. It's like not your like typical thing. And so that's a hindsight thing, that you're like, that must have been it, but it was not like an alarm bell going off at the time.
Yeah. There's a couple sort of logistical things. One person's asking, where do you put your poles while you're searching? Another person was asking if you got a signal before you got to him, which I'm assuming, well, you saw him probably. Did you see him before you got the signal?
Yeah, so I saw him before I got the signal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't have a signal, and I can tell you that going down a slope, doing those zigzags without a signal is very, very scary. it really feels like you're looking for like a needle in a haystack, even though like you have all the skills, but it's like, yeah, pretty challenging. And then the poles, I it's funny when you like, I know I've watched the video quite a few times, and that was like one of the things I thought about too. I know like in practice scenarios, I put them behind my bag, like kind of slip them in, but on it, I just had them in my hand and then had my beacon out. You're just kind of trying to move as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question, what were the Avi dangers for the day? They're wondering, was it a deep persistent slab or a wind slab?
It's funny, I just got this question too. I'm not 100% positive, but I believe it was a moderate day. But yeah, I don't totally know that. It was not a deep persistent slab. It looked like a little bit of a buried wind slab there. That kind of was like that particular pocket there. Yeah, but yeah, it was, I mean, we were pretty fortunate last year. We didn't have those like deep persistent sort of things. And a lot of times when you're skiing those like steeper lines, you won't have that deep persistent slab, even though that was the fan down there, but they have a lot more flushing going on and whatnot.
Yeah. Now here's a bit of a hypothetical question. Cam asking, what would you do if there were two people buried, but you can visibly see one?
Yeah, I mean, hypothetical. I mean, if you can see one and they're moving, then maybe they have an airway, and you know that there's another one. What I do know, like just more so from scenarios I've done and watching people that go past people, it's really hard to go back uphill. So clearing that scene as you go down is so important. I mean, if you have, and that's when you get into like, do you have like more than one person searching? Because of course, then someone can go right to that person that's out of the snow.
Yeah, really well said, Chris. I think, yeah, in hypotheticals like that, clearing the search area is moving uphill is difficult.
Yeah,
it's just really, really hard. It's a lot slower. So clearing it from the top down, I think that's a great point. If you do see someone moving, they're likely breathing and in a pretty okay situation compared to someone buried.
And a few questions about the various people out there. It sounds like there were a lot of people out there and some people on the ridge. So some folks were wondering how you communicate with them, or, you know, you could communicate with your group by radio, but was there a way to communicate to those other people not to come down?
yeah. I mean, and that was kind of like the point that Douglas was making, that it was fortunate that the people out there were seasoned travelers or like backcountry users, and had the know-how to make those decisions. But yeah, I mean, if you're in a bigger group, it's great. I mean, I would have someone standing up there being like, please don't go down on these people. But yeah, it's interesting with the radios. Drew was talking like at like a professional level. In my recreational group of skiers, like we all use radios now. We've kind of like gone that way. We've just, people aren't always the best at staying in buddies. Like they're not always the best at doing, it's like you have your ways that you want to do it, but the radios really help with that.
For sure.
Someone's kind of gone AWOL for a bit or whatever, or even just like you can shout backup conditions or whatever. It doesn't even have to be challenging, but I'm a huge advocate for radios, like on all levels. If anybody's done any like scenarios or anything like that, normally like the general consensus at the end of everyone was the communication was poor.
Absolutely.
And communication is everything. Like when you have those like clear communications, you're so much more efficient as a group.
Absolutely. One person's asking, as your first avalanche rescue experience, did anything surprise you compared to your practice scenarios?
Yeah, I was, I mean, you practice and you kind of wonder how you're going to react. You never know how you're going to react with, like under stress or whatever. And it's like the flow state was totally real, where you're like thinking so quickly and so clearly, but also having these like random thoughts of like thinking about like, Noah had a wife and kid. You're just like, oh no, like that's coming in to your like whole process while you're going through the whole scenario. So that kind of like surprised me, I guess. Was just like that, like it's clarity, but like you have like a million thoughts, and like time goes by so slowly but quickly at the same time. Yeah.
It's really real.
Yeah, super real.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like an interesting thing. It's like so we measured it basically from like when he starts tumbling to when I get to him was about 90 seconds or so. But I only like cleared about half or maybe 2/3 of that slope. So if I hadn't had a signal, or if he had been fully buried and I hadn't seen him, say it's like you're up to like 2.5 minutes before I'm like into my fine search. You get a pro like as a single rescuer, you get your probe out and then you got to start shoveling. Your like 10-minute window gets pretty small, like, and like I'm moving quick on that video for sure.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue, Chris. I wanted to take a minute to like frame how quickly you're actually moving in that, and like how well it's done and how easy you make like traveling through complicated terrain look. And in I think a lot of recreational kind of scenarios that might not be the case. So if you're feeling that you're clearing the slope at like 5 minutes or whatever, maybe getting to a fine search in like hypothetical world, just imagining how that would go if it wasn't a group of people professionally doing it and skiing at a level where you're if you see someone all of a sudden you decide to straight line for a couple, if that's not in your skill bag, just kind of calculating out how long those things could take. Yeah.
Totally. No, I mean, it's like, yeah, it takes a really long time, even when you know all the things and doing all the things right. It's
right,
yeah.
Because it's also a place, right? So that's
Yeah,
like another
totally.
part of like how to enter. And like I'm looking at the top of the slope when we can see your ski tips. It's like, and there's an avalanche. The first time I saw it, I was like, well, how is he gonna get in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, really good.
Is there any more questions?
Yeah, there's a few up. There's quite a few actually. Daniel's asking, is there a concern with signal reception and moving too fast during a search? i.e., is it possible to have skied past him?
I mean, you can see, I mean, I would answer that by like in the video, when I ski up to him, my beacon starts picking him up like right when I'm there. And I'm moving very fast when I ski up to him. But I mean, you think like that top section, like I feel like you can move pretty quick when you don't have a signal, as long as you're like going across the slope.
Yeah.
But I mean, technically they have 80 meters, and I'm definitely not doing 80-meter zigzags there.
Yeah. So just on that whole thing, Nancy, and to answer the question a bit, is like you've got big overlap, you've got big redundancy in like how big your zigzags are, like Chris is saying, and then you're also moving across the slope, so you're likely going to pass it a number of times. Wasn't super wide in this case, so there's a lot of opportunity for you to get a signal, even though in the video I totally agree, it looks like you're moving really fast. And we got to remember that in that signal search time, that's the fastest we're moving in the whole scenario, really, right? We'll start slowing down as we start getting more information.
Yeah, like, and if I had gotten the signal, that's like, then you like definitely start start slowing down onto it. I definitely like highly recommend people, like whenever they're playing around with beacons or whatever, to do a range check and like kind of have that visual of like where beacons go in and out of range. It's generally not as far as you think it is. And they do all sorts of weird things with holes and stuff like that. So just, I think that helps with like the mental map side of it, of like when you're doing your zigzags, it's like I feel like you can move fast when you have like confidence in your beacon, I guess would be, and like the process that you're going through there.
Yeah, I would say a solid process and a good practice in assessing distance, not misjudging 20 meters as 100 meters or vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple comments coming in, one about how the rescue really starts when you get the person on the surface, and if you have to do first aid or if you have to get them out. And then another question is, what are some of the best ways of calling in for a rescue, especially without cell service?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. That's like with the Solomon crew right now, that's definitely like our focus is like, if you're an avid recreational backcountry skier, I feel like the companion rescue side of things should be like, this is a given. Like we can practice this all day long. We have the tools, the beacon, the probe, the shovel, everything. But it's totally right. Like when you get that person to the surface, that's when like everything else starts coming into play for sure. So like how you call for rescue, that's different everywhere you go. And I highly recommend you research that before you go. If you have cell service, calling 911, if you have an inReach, if you have a radio, it's different everywhere you go, but that's a really big part of your plan for the day. And maybe it's just even knowing where you can get cell reception. Like where's the closest place. And like we're going into our Avalanche skills training tomorrow, and that'll be a big part, is the toboggan. I hang out with a lot of guides, so I use most of their stuff. Alpine Threadworks has this awesome guides tarp, and I used it in another incident last year where someone was just like really cold. They kind of hurt their knee, and has so many good uses for it. But yeah, like you get that person to the surface, you're doing first aid, and then you're figuring out how to get them into a helicopter, most likely. Yeah.
Great. I'll put a link in the chat, but maybe one of you can talk about interference with transceivers and electronic devices a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's pretty real to start with.
Totally.
We actually did a rescue scenario at work the other day, and we knew it was one signal, and as soon as my coworker entered the slope, her beacon read two signals like right away. Definitely 10 meters behind her, which we knew wasn't true. And so we did a bit of an assessment of all the electronics around. And really some of the take-home messages we got from that were spacing in search mode. So in send mode, if there's something quite close to it in like the 30 centimeters kind of world, there's a chance that it's going to not project the same way. And I think things like crystal screens and stuff like that, even chunks of metal, your shovel, these kinds of things can like completely stop a beacon. If you take your shovel blade out and put your beacon behind it and try to find it, it's quite difficult. So chunks of metal, and then everything electronic really starts messing with it quite a bit. I think as general rules, you want that degree of separation to be much better when you're in search mode. So your phone, radio, Avalanche bag, whatever it is, you've got your DSLR camera strapped to your front, whatever it is, if you can take those off, put them in your pack and get your hand out front of you to get that separation away from your beacon when you're trying to search with it. A lot of the newer well, not a lot, some of the newer beacons will tell you if there's interference, or will actually, you'll actually be able to hear the interference. It won't sound like beeps, but it'll sound like static. And so those are all great indicators that you might be having signal interference. So those are great trailhead checks to do. Make sure everyone's got those separations. And I'm sure, Chris, you know, but it's hard. It is really hard to keep those things apart, especially if you're an avid radio user, because your radio's here. And if you've got the mic thing for it, your mic's here, your beacon might be here, and your camera or whatever it is. So, but take the time, spread them out. And then remember too, that if you are in an avalanche, you might not be standing upright with your legs straight out. So put those knees up and see if you all of a sudden lose that separation you once had.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of Bluetooth things going on nowadays, like GoPros, socks, I think is another one.
Yep.
I generally just turn all that stuff off in the backcountry.
Yeah. Oh, the great. The heated gloves.
Yeah.
That is like instant beacon failure if you try to search with a heated glove on.
And GPS watches too.
Yeah.
I have a watch normally on my left hand, but I'll use my beacon with my right hand. But it's just like, yeah, I've done that when you're doing like range checks too, and then like someone will introduce like a cigarette tinfoil over the beacon and or like a gum wrapper or stuff like that, and you can watch your numbers change. Like it's pretty wild for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So those degrees of separation just become very real. And yeah, the watch is a really good one. The gloves or anything that's like touching your beacon is going to throw a real red herring.
Yeah, and I think like the big thing about all that is like practicing with your beacon and knowing your beacon. So like if it does start doing weird things, like what's it doing? Why is it doing that? Can I switch it to analog? Like, and the more you practice with your beacon, the more weird stuff you're going to see it do.
Yeah, and I would echo that for all of your equipment.
Yeah.
I recommend people get out and practice in whatever capacity they have time to do it. But if you can do it in your normal ski touring stuff with your normal setup, that's so much more valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I put a lot of weight into making the scenarios as real life as possible. Like I don't think burying, stuffing a beacon in a glove and putting it 6 inches under the snow is like appropriate anymore. Like I have some overalls that I can just fill with snow, and then all of a sudden you have like a life-size dummy, and like digging out a life-size dummy is a lot different than digging out a glove for sure. So you really get that whole process going.
Yeah, it's practice with the whole thing right from the get-go. And even if, like I said earlier, even if you're just saying stuff like, is the scene safe? Hopefully those words come out of your mouth when you're doing it, or that goes through your mind of like, my first step is scene safety. My second step is so forth and so on.
Yeah. And you can do it too. Like, even before, like if you're skiing a slope with friends, being like, hey, like if anything goes, like the safe zone's over to the left or whatever, or to the right or wherever it is, like kind of have those discussions before people drop in. So you kind of have that mental map already, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think another one worth thinking about there is imagining if the snow isn't on the slope that you're planning on using to access, right? What a completely different world you're in all of a sudden, right? When the plan you had was to ski over, especially in your case, or people that are strong skiers, maybe if you're in a rockier place or a place where you really need the snow that's there, and if it's gone, even if it just sloughed away and then they got into trouble below, how you're going to make it through, I think is a really valuable conversation to have at the top.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's one last question here. And I think it also relates to how hard the snow can be to shovel. But the question from Jeff was the top surface of the avalanche snow hard to ski on? And that makes me think of shoveling in debris too.
Yeah, and it was January, so the snow was like super light, super fluffy, and so it was quite easy. When you get more into the spring, wetter avalanches, they set up so quick, and so it's incredibly challenging to get over it. I mean, that's why I could move so fast on that snow. It wasn't overly challenging to move through, but I've been into avalanche debris that you're definitely not moving that quickly through, that's for sure. And then when you get to shoveling, it's, I mean, there's so much friction when the snow moves down the mountain, so you're getting you're getting all that heat, and then it hardens up real quick.
And then there is a question about Noah. Does he still ski? And then the question was, how do you go back on a slope after that?
I mean, Noah definitely still skis. He wasn't really an avid backcountry user beforehand, but I feel like he would go back out there. And then getting back on a slope afterwards, I mean, if that had happened in the morning, I definitely wouldn't have kept skiing, that's for sure. I mean, it happened to be the end of the day and he had lost his skis anyways, and it was very clearly time to go home. But those things, yeah, I mean, you don't ever forget about those, like any kind of close call or anything like that. You think about that pretty regular for a really long time. And generally, if you're around somebody that's had a close call or been in an incident, it takes them a long time to gain confidence again. That's just part of it. I mean, a lot of times we have probably overconfidence to some degree.
How long did it take to dig Noah out?
I don't know, not very long. Like his he really wasn't like super deep or whatever, like maybe 2 or 3 minutes or something like that. Like I mean, there wasn't like a huge rush on that or whatever, but he was like, for how not deep he was buried, it was definitely a bit of digging for sure.
That's great, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the good conversation, Drew. That was great.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody watching. And this video is going up on the Forecast socials tomorrow and should be on the Avalanche Canada socials the day after. So if you liked it, share it with your friends. It's definitely super important for us to share and talk about this stuff, I think. Even though it can be a bit embarrassing at times.
Totally. I think seeing people's firsthand version of how it goes, good or bad, there's so much to learn from it. It's exactly those animated videos on Avi Savvy, but a real person doing it. And so you can pick up all these nuanced little bits. So yeah, if you're watching today and want to see it again, I recommend watching it a bunch and trying to pick up every little bit you can, because they're free lessons.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thanks to Avalanche Canada for putting these on. They're awesome. Love it.
Fantastic. Good job, you guys. Thanks, Chris and Drew. That's amazing footage, Chris. Like as Drew said, it's like the textbook companion rescue by human rather than animation. You know, it's pretty cool how calm and collected you were. At least it looked like it from our point of view. I'm sure.
Yeah, it didn't feel calm and collected.
Well, you made it look good. You know, there's been a lot of important messages tonight. You know, I think the biggest one to take away, I think you all agree, is practice. Practice with your gear, know your transceiver, do it over and over so you know all those little nuances and the glitches and how it's working and what it's telling you. And you're shovel and probe, man. You know, you go and find them and maybe they are a meter deep or something. You got a heck of a big job to dig someone out of some solid avalanche debris if they're down there deep, you know, and do it with your friends and the crew that you're going out with, right? You know, you got to have everyone that's going to have your back. With that being said, I think Nancy's going to have a couple people's backs with some draw prizes.
I do.
Yeah, the
Thank
first
you.
prize is what? A first aid bag from MEC.
Yep, here we go. And
The winner is
the winner is Mathieu Villeneuve. If I said that right, Mathieu Villeneuve, please email producer@avalanche.ca and we'll send you your prize.
And then the second prize is a Mech Alpine Light 32-liter backpack, I believe.
And the second prize is going to, here we go, yep, Mech Pack going to Anna Braun. So Anna Braun, please email producer@avalanche.ca and we'll ship you your prize.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Congratulations to those folks. That's fantastic. You know, Nancy put a whole pile of links in the chat box tonight to help you increase your knowledge on companion rescue and what you can learn. You know, go hit that Avi Savvy. You can memorize that companion rescue card. You know, there's no substitute though for actual practice, hands-on practice. Go get the knowledge, get out there with your friends and your riding partners and go practice, get your head in the snow. Go, you know, it's the best thing to do when the skiing sucks or sliding sucks. Go practice with your gear. You know, you got to make it happen. It's got to be muscle memory out there. We want to thank you all for joining. Avalanche Canada, nonprofit organization. We super appreciate your interest in avalanche safety and watching programs such as this. You can donate as little as $10 a day, $2, you know, whatever you want. There's a link in the chat box. We really appreciate it. Thanks, folks, for coming out tonight. The next webinar is a few weeks from now. We got a little Christmas break happening, January 6th, and it's choosing terrain for skiers. Should be a good one. Pre-registration is required, and I hope you folks have a fantastic winter and enjoy your holiday season out there.